Now, I want to give you another instalment on in my series of how governments spend hundreds of millions of dollars that belong to you on projects that are always going to be a waste of time, and they do it just to solve their immediate political problems. This stuff is so infuriating and yet so predictable, and sometimes it's urged on by much of the media. The classic case was the purpose-built quarantine facilities during the pandemic. The state Labor governments in Queensland and Victoria screamed for these to be built during the pandemic to try to cover up their own mismanagement of hotel quarantine. And they were cheered on by much of the media, who were ever so keen to blame the state-run quarantine problems on Scott Morrison and the then coalition federal government. So Morrison, wrongly in my view, he caved in and he agreed to help build these facilities. They were always going to cost a bomb, they were never going to be necessary, and they were always destined to become white elephants because we had vaccines and we were always going to have to learn to live with the disease. And this is not the wisdom of my hindsight. This is something we called out loudly at the time. Anastasia Palaszczuk has announced a state government quarantine facility to be built near Toowoomba today. This is on top of a joint federal project in Brisbane, or near Brisbane, and one being built in Victoria as well. Now, is it just me, or is this all a lot of spending on facilities that are likely to become white elephants very, very soon? With vaccinations rolling out not just around Australia but around the world, we should be moving to a testing and vaccination model for international travel within months. And quarantine should be obsolete. Now, you know, I was saying this months ago when everyone was pushing for specialist quarantine facilities. That was always silly. Hotel quarantine did the job. And now, with vaccines, it's redundant. And the new quarantine facilities that they're building in Queensland and Victoria, well, they'll just be more wasted taxpayers' money on white elephants. They're all built because a couple of premiers were trying to blame Canberra for their quarantine problems. Yeah, it pains me to say it. Yeah, of course, you know, I told you so. It was ever so predictable. Instead of arguing for common sense, our politicians just react to the news cycle and they look after their immediate political interests rather than looking after your dollars. We learned a couple of months ago that the $200 million Wellcamp facility in Queensland was mothballed after accommodating just 700 people. That's $300,000 each for a 2-week stay. And today we learned that the Mickleham facility north of Melbourne has also been mothballed. It's accommodated 3 times as many people, but cost almost 3 times as much. $500 million to build and $100 million or so to run. So you're talking about more than $250,000 per fortnight stay there too. Never mind, it's only your money. And even though it was always going to be a waste, it got these politicians out of an immediate media political bind at the time. And they wonder why we have budgets in the red and inflation is running amok.